When my brother landed a residency at Johns Hopkins, my parents bought him a brand new Mercedes. When I announced I was dropping out of pre-med to pursue culinary arts, my father threw a stack of medical journals at my chest and said, "You are no daughter of ours." 9 years. That's how long I lived in the dark, erased from family photos, ignored at holidays, and treated like a ghost. I built a life from nothing, sweat, tears, and a Michelin star. But when a mysterious letter arrived at my restaurant signed by my family's estate lawyer, I knew the silence was over. I drove back to the mega mansion I was banished from, expecting arrogance or outrage. But when my mother opened the door, she didn't scream or slam it in my face. Instead, she fell to her knees, grabbed my hands, and whispered 6 words that chilled me to the bone. "My name is Maya, and I'm 31 years old. If you grew up in a household where dinner conversations sound like medical symposiums, you know what pressure feels like. My father is a renowned chief of surgery, my mother is a senior cardiologist, and my older brother, Julian, was groomed to be the crown prince of our family's medical dynasty. In the Vance household, excellence wasn't encouraged, it was expected. Anything less than a medical degree was considered an absolute failure. I tried. For 22 years, I played the dutiful daughter. I studied organic chemistry until my eyes bled, took them cats, and got accepted into pre-med. But my heart was never in a hospital. My passion lived in the heat of a kitchen, creating culinary art that brought genuine smiles to people's faces. The night I told my parents I was dropping out, the air turned to ice. My father didn't just yell, he erased me. He made it clear that I was dead to the family. No inheritance, no family name, and 0 contact. Julian stood in the corner, watching in silence with a condescending smirk. I packed 2 suitcases, walked out into the rain, and never looked back. Before we go any further into what happened next, take a second to pause and comment the city you're watching from. I love reading your comments to see how far my story has reached around the world. For the first 3 years, I worked 16-hour shifts at a French bistro in downtown Chicago. I slept on a foam mattress in a studio apartment that smelled like damp laundry and hot grease. I had no safety net, no family trust fund, and no mother to call when I burned my arms on hot pans or cried myself to sleep from pure exhaustion. I sacrificed everything for my dream, and slowly, the grind paid off. I worked my way up from line cook to sous chef, and eventually, I secured an investor who believed in my vision. By 30, I was the head chef and co-owner of La Toile, a fine dining establishment that earned its first Michelin star last spring. I had built an empire of my own without a single penny from my family. Then came the envelope. It arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning during prep hours. Thick, heavy ivory paper with gold embossing. Law offices of Vance, Sterling, and Croft. Inside was a formal demand notice signed by Arthur Sterling, my family's longtime estate attorney. It stated that my presence was urgently required at the Vance family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, regarding an unresolved property matter of maximum priority. No phone call. No explanation. Just an official summons. My blood ran cold, but curiosity won. I got into my car and made the 4-hour drive back to the neighborhood I was banished from. Pulling into the long, winding driveway of the Greenwich mansion felt like driving into a graveyard of my past. The sprawling stone mansion stood as imposing as ever, but something felt distinctly off. The lush gardens were slightly overgrown, and the fountain in the circular drive wasn't running. I parked, straightened my blazer, and took a deep breath to steady my heart rate. I prepared myself for the cold sneers, the patronizing remarks from Julian, and my father's thunderous silence. I stepped up to the massive double doors and rang the bell. The door swung open almost immediately, but the person standing there wasn't the regal, stoic woman I remembered. It was my mother. She looked 10 years older than her age. Her hair was unkempt, her expensive silk blouse was wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed her sunken eyes. When her eyes met mine, her hands began to tremble. I braced myself for her to tell me to get off her property. Instead, my mother dropped to her knees right on the cold stone porch. She grabbed the hem of my pants, looked up with tears streaming down her face, and whispered 6 words that sent a shiver down my spine. "Maya, please tell me you're here to save us." I stood frozen, completely bewildered.
"Mom? What are you talking about? Get up."
She sobbed, pulling me inside the foyer. The house was eerie and silent. I walked into the grand library where my father and Julian were sitting. The contrast to 9 years ago was staggering. My father sat slumped in a leather armchair, staring blankly at the cold fireplace. Julian sat at the mahogany desk, holding his head in his hands, surrounded by stacks of legal notices and red-stamped bank statements. There was no smugness left in Julian. No arrogance left in my father. Arthur Sterling, the family attorney, stood up from the corner of the room.
"Maya."
"Thank you for coming. I'll get straight to the point because time is running out." As Attorney Sterling spoke, the truth unfolded like a nightmare. My brother Julian, the golden boy, the high-flying doctor, had fallen prey to aggressive, high-risk medical equipment investments 4 years ago. Desperate to cover his massive losses, he had convinced my father to co-sign loans using their prestigious private medical clinic as collateral. To make matters worse, Julian had been skimming funds from the clinic to pay off offshore creditors. The clinic was now facing catastrophic bankruptcy, and both my father and brother were staring at potential fraud charges and total financial ruin. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice cold and unyielding. "You disowned me 9 years ago. You made it very clear I wasn't part of this family. Call your bankers." My father finally raised his head, his voice raspy and stripped of pride. "We can't, Maya. The bank is foreclosing on the clinic property in 48 hours unless we liquidate the land it stands on to pay the principal debt." "Then sell it," I replied coldly. Attorney Sterling stepped forward and opened a thick leather folder. "They can't sell it, Maya, because they don't own the land. You do." The room went dead quiet. Sterling explained that 9 years ago, right around the time I was kicked out, my late grandfather, my mother's father, had quietly amended his personal trust before he passed away. Grandfather was a self-made man who always hated how my parents treated me for choosing a different path. He had placed the prime commercial land beneath the family clinic into an irrevocable trust, locked for 9 years, named solely to me. That trust had matured exactly 3 days ago. My family didn't own the clinic ground. They were my tenants. And without my signature to transfer the land title over to the bank as leverage, my father and brother were going to lose their licenses, their reputation, and their freedom. My father looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. "Maya, please. We are your blood. Sign the property transfer. If you do, we can liquidate it, clear the debt, and save the family name. You can name your price." I looked at my brother, who couldn't even meet my gaze. Then I looked at my mother, still drying her tears, and my father, who had tossed me out like garbage when I was 22. They only cared about my existence now because I held the key to their survival. "No," I said clearly. Julian gasped. "Maya, you can't be this cold. They'll ruin us." "You ruined yourselves," I said, stepping closer to the desk. "I built my life on honesty and hard work. You built yours on arrogance and fraud. I will not sign over my grandfather's land, so you can sell it off to cover up your crimes." However, I didn't leave them completely in the dust. I offered them a deal on my terms. I agreed to let my management company take over the lease of the land, but under one condition. My father and Julian had to step down from executive management immediately. A board of independent ethical auditors would oversee the clinic, and a percentage of all clinic profits would be directed into a charity foundation I controlled to serve underprivileged patients. If they refused my terms, I would evict the clinic from my land by Monday morning. They signed my agreement that very night. They had no other choice. As I walked out of the Greenwich mansion and stepped back into my car, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying for 9 years. The family that had discarded me for not wearing a white coat was now operating on my terms, paying rent to the daughter they deemed a failure. I drove back to Chicago, to my restaurant, my kitchen, and the life I had earned with my own hands. True family isn't defined by titles, degrees, or bloodlines. It's built on respect, integrity, and love. Now, I want to ask you a question. If you were in my shoes, Would you have offered them a way out, or would you have walked away and let them face foreclosure? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.